Welcome to Almost Here, Round the Corner Future Technology podcasts with Richard Jacobs. Future technologies poised to transform our lives for better or worse are the focus of this podcast. Almost here means these technologies are now here and starting to be used, or just around the corner, from Bitcoin to artificial intelligence, 3D printing, blockchain, virtual reality, and more.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Future Tech Podcast. My guest is Andrew Smith-Lewis, the CEO of Cerego, C-E-R-E-G-O. The website is Cerego.com. So, Andrew, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
Good. So tell me the premise of Cerego. The name's interesting. Where did the name come from, and what's the company about?
The name Cerego comes from Cera, kind of for brain, like cerebellum, and go to proceed. So the genesis of the name was to get your brain to proceed, which we think is a good thing to do. And the company is the mission of the company is to really be able to measure and improve human potential. We want to make people smarter using a combination of some narrow AI and cognitive science.
So make them smarter in what way? Better memory, able to think more clearly?
Yeah, good question. So Cerego is about the concept that we can radically improve people's ability and speed to learn material and to help them hang on to that longer, retain it, and ultimately to kind of quantify what they know. So the main thrust of what we're doing is using some very well-proven research that speaks to increasing retention over time and to be able to then use that information you've learned for whatever it is you're doing, passing a test, going through nursing school, performing on the job, etc.
So what's the mechanism that you guys use to help people improve all those metrics?
The mechanism. So good question. So it's a combination of things. We've developed so let me step back. First of all, it's a platform. The platform has web and mobile applications. The platform is content agnostic, meaning it works with anything. So whether you are in the 9th grade learning biology, or you're at the Mayo Clinic studying neuroscience, or you're at a corporation learning sales procedures, the system is able to basically ingest this content and help learners learn it. The learning side of Cerego is a series of algorithms that we've kind of developed and battle tested. We've nicknamed our main algorithm DARPA, which stands for the Distributed Adaptive Retrieval Practice Algorithm. A little bit of a mouthful, but it takes advantage of two of the most readily provable phenomena for learning. One is called distributed learning, which says, hey, if long-term retention is your goal, you need to spread the information out over time, which we all kind of intuitively know, but the devil's in the details of how do you do that user by user, item by item. And the other is this concept of retrieval practice that says when you engage in learning, you need to do it in such a way that you kind of stimulate the brain, stimulate that neural net in such a way that you really hang on to that information. And that can be through some sort of a probe or question or something that's got a certain amount of desirable difficulty to it. And so by developing this algorithm that can measure what you know and predict your future performance, we're able to basically take anyone on a device that has content that they need to hang on to and have them learn it and retain it, generally in about half the time that it would normally take, with a whole lot better in terms of outcomes.
So how do you speed it up? Have you figured out the optimal distance between learning periods, or what other factors have you tweaked to make it better?
Well, speed is a function of efficiency. And one of the things is that when somebody sits down to learn, a lot of their time and energy goes into trying to figure out, well, what should they do now? Where are they strong? Where are they weak? What should they focus on? How do they prepare for that test or deployment or whatever they have going on? And there's a lot of self-regulation, or what we call meta-cognition, in the equation. The problem is that we never really teach anybody how to be efficient learners. So you can be very, very, very smart. It doesn't mean you're a very, very efficient learner. So what the algorithm does is kind of replace that self-assessment process for you. So when I come into the system, it says, hey, Andrew, welcome back. Here's some new content. Here's some review content, and off you go. And by focusing my energy on exactly what I need to see when, it becomes a highly efficient model for getting in and out very quickly. So I'll give you an example. We have at any given time 80,000 nursing students through one of our publishing partners using Cerego. And the content they're studying is very complicated. and they can get in and out of the application on a mobile device in 10 minutes, having a very targeted, specific, and effective learning experience where most people can't open the textbook in 10 minutes and figure out where they left off. You know what I mean?
Well, how do you do that? Do you monitor, do you test them each time they do a lesson, and then you look and see what they got wrong, or do you test them when they come back, see what they got wrong, and then serve up to them the things they just need to work on?
You're on the right track. Cerego, when you see content in Cerego, you're either being presented it in a review or for the first time. You might be watching a video or reading a document or interacting with some kind of a diagram or simulation. And at some point in the future, we're going to ask you about that information. But we're going to space out the asking of that in such a way that we're asking you just when you're on the verge of forgetting it, which is the optimal time to rebuild that memory. And so by spacing out on a user-by-user, item-by-item basis, the presentation and then the review of that content in this highly efficient way, we know exactly where you are and when you need to see it in the future. And then we take into account some things like, well, if we quiz you, how cognitively difficult was the quiz? Is it multiple choice? Is it fill in the blank? Are you, asked to do something that has a higher level of cognitive complexity to it? When was the last time you saw that item, and how did you do at that point? And what was your pattern of seeing this item up until now? A little bit about your latency of response and how long you're spending with that item. And we can use all that data to figure out how well do you know something now, and then when and how do we show it to you in the future?
I have a couple questions. So why would you wait until someone almost forgets something, and how would you know that you waited long enough till they almost forgot something? It's kind of odd.
That's a really, really good question. So I'm going to tell you let me ask you a question. Do you know my wife's name?
No, I don't think I've ever asked.
Good. So I'd be worried if you did, but my wife's name is Cindy. So let me ask you, what's my wife's name?
Cindy.
How would you spell that?
Probably the traditional way, Cindy.
Yeah, you got it. So right now you know my wife's name. Do you think in 3 days you're going to remember my wife's name?
Yeah, probably not, unless something else would trigger the memory of that.
Yeah, right, exactly. So if I repeat my wife's name to you right now 3 times, Cindy, 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 it's not going to help you in 3 days. But if I space that out, if you and I talked in like tomorrow morning and I reminded you that my wife's name was Cindy, and then we did it a day later, the odds are in 3 days you'd remember. So the important point is to figure out when's the right time to reintroduce this material so that you get some benefit to it. Because obviously just saying Cindy, 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 Cindy isn't going to do us any good right now. Now the question is, how do you measure that point? How do you know when is the right point to introduce it? And what happens is, with our system, when you start using Cerego, we ask you some questions. And then we predict your future response. So let's say we predict in 2 days you will have forgotten my wife's name. And we ask you, hey, what was that guy's name that you interviewed on Friday? What was his wife's name? And you get it correct. And you spell it correctly first time out of the gate. There's probably an error in our calculation. There's a gap between the prediction where we thought you'd probably forget it and the reality of where you are. And we plug that gap between prediction and reality into the evaluation of your memory strength for that item. And so by doing this over and over, we have what's called an error corrective model. So every time you touch Cerego, we get a little bit smarter about where you are in the journey. And by doing that, the system gets really, really sticky. And that stickiness is reflective of just showing you things at that optimal moment where there's still a little bit of difficulty, but you haven't completely lost it. Does that kind of make sense?
Well, why don't you do other tricks? Like, if you find that people have the hardest time remembering certain things, why not tell stories about them? Like, if you wanted me to remember your wife, why wouldn't you say, like, hey, she's a great marathon runner and she just won the Boston Marathon. And then I'm more likely to remember that because I have a detail about her and it's not just a name.
Yeah, so what you're talking about is something called variable encoding theory, which says that the more information and connections you have to the target you're trying to learn, the easier it is to recall it. So some guy's wife and their name is Cindy doesn't give you a lot of variable encoding. There's not a lot of meat on the bones there. So you're right that by providing more information, the experience gets richer and the memory gets stickier. So when we work with partners, for example, we've had a program at UT Austin that's been teaching jazz powered by Cerego for a couple years. And they have had, I think the number is 135,000 students go through one of the MOOC platforms on Jazz. And what's interesting there is that they're incorporating not just Chet Baker and that he was a cool jazz trumpet player, but they've got clips of audio and they've got pictures of Chet Baker's and descriptions of Chet Baker. And by doing that, you create a richer experience. But still, all of that is controlled by the algorithm. So I think you're 100% correct. The richer the content, the better the experience, but you still want a really smart algorithm to do it. And what we've seen, I'll give you an example of results. We've seen, for example, New York University Dental School for 3 years running use Cerego, and they've created some very rich and interesting content for the National Dental Board exams, and they have seen phenomenal results. They've gone from a historic pass rate of about 80% to 1 year 100%, the other 2 years like 99.8% pass rates for thousands of students by combining the algorithm with the right content. And that's a really important thing for Cerego.
All right, so you do incorporate that as well.
100%. It's not a prerequisite. I mean, you can drop in your favorite 100 Chinese verbs and their definition, and the system will work just fine. And what's interesting about it is even if it's more difficult for you to remember, you may see that content more often. But if it's got rich media around it, it could be the case that you don't need to see it as often because you're really building that memory strength.
Is there a better way to teach nursing 101, for instance, after you've reviewed data on 10,000 people going through it through your app, versus like, oh, it has to be customized for everybody and everyone's different? I would think there's a lot of best practices that help you improve how the course is taught regardless.
Yeah, I would say that that's true, and mostly where it comes out is something that we on our insight side. So there are three parts of Cerego. One is an authoring environment. One is the learning algorithm side and the applications that we've been discussing so far, and the other is on the insight side. Part of the insight you could imagine being a nursing 101 instructor is, hey, how are my students doing? Where are they strong? Where are they weak? And some things about their behavior and cognitive ability. But the other is on the content insight. So we can tell a nursing instructor about how the content is performing. And that instructor then gets some, what I would call targeted intervention. So she can walk into class, pull out her mobile phone, and know that everybody's having trouble with certain types of material. And that will then, there's a virtuous cycle from studying on your own to the instructor getting the real-time analytics to walking into class and saying, hey, we're going to talk about hemorrhagic shock today because I see that that's something everybody's struggling with.
Oh, okay. So it is a back and forth, and you are doing that.
Oh, yeah, that's super important. And we really embrace instructors because I'll tell you what we've seen from our data, and we have literally thousands of EDUs that are using Cerego. What we see from the data is that the more engaged instructors end up with students who do better, right? So there's high correlation between instructor engagement and student outcomes. And the way we look at instructor engagement is, are they paying attention to the reports? How deeply are they looking at that information, right? And so what we try to do is create applications and experiences really for the instructor as well, so that you can understand your students and figure out what are the steps I can take to improve their outcomes and to improve the course.
I guess this probably happens more in high school or grade school, sadly, but you probably don't want to deal with teachers that are locked in and have to teach to the test, because then Cerego can help people just pass a test, which is not really like ideal. It's really better, I would think, if you help them learn a subject and get good at it and get enjoyment out of it. Are those two ever at conflict with what you do, or you don't deal in that arena where you have that stuff?
I think about that a lot because I think it's a really important issue, and there's so much of our system is unfortunately rewarding the behavior of just passing the test, and so you have instructors that are pegged to that. I think the ones that realize that Cerego, so I'll go back to my New York University dental. Obviously, it's important to pass the dental exam. What's interesting about this is not only did the pass rate go up, but the instructor time was cut by 50%. So those instructors got half their time back using Cerego that they could then use for the more human-to-human interaction, right? And could do better things with their time and with their students than worry about the test prep side of it. So I think you get a 2-for-1 if you do it correctly.
Yeah, even the fact that you tell teachers to go back and recover material. I mean, that, my experience with school, with college, was like it's a train that never stops. So if you don't understand something, a few days go by, they keep going on to more and more material, and you just get so frustrated you want to scream because you didn't understand, and it's hard to get the answers, and then it just keeps going and it won't stop, and then you're like, I give up. So it's good
I'm
that
with you 100%.
You'll go back and cover stuff. Yeah.
Yes.
So is your system such that I can put on any content and the AI will learn, or do you have to put it on? Do you have to curate it and set it up, and then over time, over thousands of people going through a course, it'll get to a viable improvement? Like, how
Super
good
good
is the
question.
system?
Super good question. So first of all, it's not based on a statistical model. We don't need, N number of students to run through something before we can start to do it. You can be one person on Cerego learning about, Tibet, or you could be 10,000 people in a course. It doesn't matter. So it doesn't matter about the number of users, which is really, really important. When you put content into Cerego and you start off, we don't know a whole lot about you. But as you go through the learning process, we get some overt and covert signal, and we use that to be able to really improve the experience for you. So if you and I start off in a course on, learning Italian, the system's going to have very little data about us. But soon it's going to figure out that you've got some prior knowledge and that you're a fast language guy, and I'm a bit slower, and I got some issues with verbs. And so it's going to start to really figure out how to present to us in such a way that we get to that same end goal. And you might have gone through it in 3 hours. It could have taken me 11 hours, but we can sort of compute that end state and make sure that we both get there independent of the amount of time and effort it took us.
So what kind of courses get put into Cerego? Like, who makes them, and how many courses do you have?
So to clarify, we are an enterprise to enterprise, or B2B to C kind of model. So we are not a, hey, come on board and build a set for a Spanish course type of program. We sell to enterprises across K-12, higher ed, EDU, corporate government. So people build their own program. It's really about enterprise learning at scale. But with that said, there are nearly 100,000 plus minus programs that have been developed on the platform. Everything from aviation to astronomy to Dartmouth teaching Italian opera powered by Cerego. And the people who use our authoring environment tend to be instructors or instructional designers. It's very easy to create content in Cerego and then remix it and reuse it. So we spend a lot of time on the authoring environment because teachers notoriously are short on time, and we just need to make it as frictionless as possible to be able to use the system.
Well, what if I don't attend a university, but I want to take some of Cerego's courses? Can I do that? Is it open to individuals to subscribe?
Good question. It is technically open to individuals to make their own stuff and to play with it, but there's no learning library where you can go in and find programs.
Well, what if I just want to use, I want to learn Italian opera, and you have a course on it, and I look through your catalog. Can I go take the course that's on your system, even though it's associated with, University of Nebraska or something?
Yeah, no, not through Cerego directly, because again, we don't have a learning library where you can search for goodies from other programs. But if you were in the edX world, there are 20 different programs powered by Cerego within edX. So if you're on a MOOC platform learning Italian opera at the University of Nebraska, in this case it's actually Dartmouth, the Cerego application comes up directly within the edX environment. So we basically, if you think about it this way, we go to where the action is. So we go to where learners are within their university, within MOOCs, within corporations. Does that make sense?
Yeah. What is edX, by the way?
What is edX?
Yeah.
Are you familiar with MOOCs?
I'm familiar with like Coursera and places like that, but I haven't heard of edX or MOOC yet.
edX is the East Coast Coursera. It's got 8 million plus students on it. It's a not-for-profit built from the endowments of Harvard and MIT. It's basically Coursera, not-for-profit on the East Coast. I think there are 300 or 400 schools. And you think about a MOOC, this is a great example. So a lot of MOOCs have videos and discussions, and they've tried to take the classroom experience online, but they haven't really innovated about how people learn. They've innovated the where people learn, the delivery, but not how. And so what we can do is we can inject a little how magic through Cerego directly into that MOOC, so students that are studying whatever is in there get the benefit of the Cerego learning experience. And then those schools get the benefit of the data.
Okay. And just in case people don't know, a MOOC would be like what, a multi-user online course or something like that, or what does a MOOC stand for?
I think it stands for Massive Open Online Course.
Okay.
The classic one being the Stanford professor who did machine learning and had 120,000 students come on board. So that was what kind of kicked off the revolution. I think it was Andrew Ng, and he was one of the founders of Coursera. Anyway, that's what kind of kicked off.
Yeah, I took his course on Coursera. Yeah, I know him.
There you go. That's what kicked off the revolution. And with Cerego, had that course been powered by Cerego, you'd still remember that content.
I was just thinking about it actually as we were talking, because I liked how it was presented, but it didn't have anything that you're talking about. I had to go back myself and try to find stuff, and yes, I see why this would be so much more powerful. So for individual people, I know this is not the intent, but they can go on edX, and there are a number of courses powered by Cerego on there.
Yeah, and you can also, so technically on the Cerego, if you go to Cerego.com, there are free trials. You can try it on your own. You can play with it. So my feeling is that learning should always be accessible and open to end users. We just don't provide third-party people's content at this point in an open marketplace. But we welcome individuals to try Cerego, download the either native iOS or Android apps, and there's some free trials, and you can play with it and kind of, get a feeling for what this sort of personalized and predictive learning is about.
Yeah, so what are the comments, some of the comments you've gotten that you thought were really interesting or helpful or insightful from users?
I think in higher ed, we're seeing about 90% plus of users saying that they learn better with Cerego, that they would like to see Cerego in another program. The biggest complaint we get, no kidding, is we get complaints from students and I'm thinking about the K-12 place in specifics where there are instructors who have started to use Cerego. The biggest complaint is when that kid walks out of a biology class powered by Cerego and goes down the hall to a history class and there's no Cerego, they complain. They're like, why isn't this program on Cerego? Because once you start to learn this way, why would you want to do it any other way? And the efficiency and scale is just superb. So when the right content goes into Cerego, it's a beautiful experience, and people are happy, and the results that we see are tremendous. We did some early research work sponsored by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and we saw really good retention rates in programs. I'll give you another anecdote. We worked with a community college out here in California that was seeing about a 60% pass rate for an anatomy and physiology program. When they moved to Cerego and adopted our program, that pass rate went up to 97%. And they no longer required a $375 textbook because they were using free and open resources to put that course together. So when I see things like that, I get really excited about helping students really excel academically and to move on.
Well, this will create a better pool of employable people for various employers too if they use Cerego. Like if
better pool
someone does,
and faster to retrain them. Yep.
Well, I could see that, right. You could attach at some point a Cerego certification. If someone's going to go through something, they can get that diploma, that certification. But if it's Cerego certified, that would mean to me as the potential employer or the person paying for this person to take the course that they've gotten a lot more out of it than just the regular course. So I could see you guys doing that to really, make all learning better.
I agree with you, and I'll tell you one anecdote, if I may, related to what you're saying. We just announced a partnership with Africa Leadership University, which is out. I think they have 3 campuses in Africa, phenomenal school, and their focus is on creating the next generation of leaderships for the continent. And it's all about future student leaders. And they had a traditional admissions process where you would write 8 essays, and they try to figure out from reading these 8 essays, who to let in. And that was not an efficient model for them. They also realized that it wasn't really fair. They had a lot of first-generation applicants to their schools who were spending hours and hours writing applications to be rejected, and they were very worried about kind of turning students off to the future of higher education. So long story short, they worked with Cerego to build a one-week mobile course that teaches about ethics, morality, leadership, the values of the university, their vision for the future. It's a one-week program. It's powered by Cerego. And what they're doing is they're looking at the results from that program to help them make better selections based on student performance. So kind of related to your idea.
Yeah, what if I run a company and I have certain trainings I want to do for my people? How much of an effort would it be to Ceregoize them so that, I know my employees are the training sinking in a lot better than just handing them like a employee handbook and saying, go read it.
This is the bread and butter of our business. This is what we do. So our system, we work with corporations to onboard their content. They either do it themselves or they get a little bit of help with us. And what the employer gets is insight not only into retention. Hey, a bunch of people learn this stuff, but you can look down and see, well, what are the rates? Who are my fastest to learn, slowest to forget? Or who are my most diligent people? And what's interesting is that we leave it up to you to value that data. You might have a job that requires people that are highly agile and can switch gears fast. And you can find those people within your data. Or conversely, you might have something that requires a certain amount of diligence and dedication, and you want people who are more kind of aligned that way. And now you have a data-driven model for finding that talent and understanding performance. So, that's when we started off, I said we want to measure and improve human potential. Part of this is that the measurement and understanding gives really interesting insights, both for an individual, but also for, a school or an organization that's trying to really match the right people with the right job.
Yeah. All right. Interesting. Is it a lot of work to put a course into Cerego, or is it not too bad?
I don't think it's too bad. I'll tell you an anecdote around that. So one of our university partners, I'll leave their name out for now, but it's a top tier school, came to us 3 weeks before they launched a 700 level biology course. And we said, hey, it's possible. It's a little bit fast, but it's possible. And we said, you need our help. They're like, no, we're a technical school. We know how to build content. Don't worry. So they built the content. They launched this. I think it was a 10-week program. Well, everything went fine, but by week, I think it was week 5, students got to week 5, and their discussion boards just lit up with furious students. And the nature of the complaint was that the school, because they didn't have enough time, they only built content for half the program just to see if people liked it. And so you had these biology students who all of a sudden got to this point. And it's like, where's the rest of the content? So, that's my favorite story about building content on Cerego. It is straightforward. We have clients who literally get up in long days, short weeks on the platform.
All right, that's really cool. So, last question or so. What's the future for Cerego over the next 6 months or a year? What's coming?
Well, I think I would describe that in 2 ways. One is in terms of our growth. So we're seeing more than 5 times the number of users that we had last year in the system. So we're kind of on a tear in terms of growth. We're expanding in terms of our clients and reach from companies using us to train biotech, sales people to the U.S. Army training combat life-saving powered by Cerego, to universities, great schools like the KIPP charter schools picking up Cerego. So we're really in a pretty big expansion mode in terms of our growth, which is great. I think you'll see more and more institutions powered by Cerego for some really interesting content. On the technology side, we invest heavily in the research in both proving our algorithms and improving them over time, as well as making it easier and easier to use the system. That could be from a content creator's perspective, using things like natural language processing to make it much easier to build content on Cerego, to extending out to, more and more platforms. So we're really about lower the friction and increase effectiveness and grow.
Very good. Well, this is a really interesting podcast. I want to check out your system, and I'll probably get to it first through edX. But for listeners, what's the best way for them to ask questions or engage or get involved, take a Cerego course, etc.?
Yeah, I think the best thing to do is go to Cerego.com, Cerego.com, or look for us in the Google Play or Apple stores and download the app from iTunes, and away you go. And again, there are some sample courses in there to excite the possibilities, give you a feeling for what it's about. We love hearing from users.
Well, very good. Well, thanks for coming on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Hey, thank you.
You have been listening to Almost Here, Around the Corner Future Technology podcast with Richard Jacobs. Subscribe to this podcast, post a review to discover more future technologies that are poised to transform our lives for better or worse, such as Bitcoin, artificial intelligence, 3D printing, blockchain, virtual reality, and more.